All right. Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of October 23rd, 2017. Let us all rise for a pledge of allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin today by recognizing the mayor.
Mr. Chairman, nice to be with you today. Always nice when it's an award for excellence. And this month it's being presented to Officer Matthew Franken, who works in our Central Investigations Unit of the Police Department, nominated in the category of productivity for his work on a homicide investigation, which has so far led to the arrest of 10 different people, including the person who committed the homicide who has been convicted. In December of 2016, police responded to a report of a disturbance and found a man with a fatal gunshot wound in the trunk of a car. Matt was assigned as the case manager for the homicide investigation. He immediately interviewed 2 women arrested at the scene on narcotics violations, quickly built a rapport with one of the women, learned the name of one man and the nickname of a second man, both of whom fled the scene. He also established the address of the shooting, and a search warrant was served. With the woman's information, Matt worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office on their fugitive task force to locate the known male suspect in Omaha, and he was returned to Lincoln. Matt interviewed him, confirmed the second suspect's nickname. The known suspect was then arrested for being an accessory to murder. Matt was contacted a colleague on the Omaha Police Department to see if he could identify the man with a nickname. That suspect was quickly identified, and further investigation led to surveillance of the Lincoln residence where the homicide actually occurred. The suspect was soon spotted leaving the home with several others. The officers attempted to stop the vehicle, which led to a short pursuit and then a lengthy manhunt after the suspect drove the vehicle into Little Salt Creek. As a result of the information Matt collected, the suspect was arrested for second-degree murder, and 7 others were arrested for accessory to murder. Matt's follow-up investigation then included 7 search warrants, the collection of 12 DNA samples, and many interviews. He also worked with other law enforcement agencies and prosecutors to build the case against the primary suspect, who is now serving a 35 to 45-year sentence for manslaughter and for possession of methamphetamine with intent to sell. In addition to all his different investigations, Matt has also been the driving force in creating a department policy on officer-involved shootings. In his nomination, Ripley wrote, with these type of high-profile investigations, the potential for civil unrest within a community is significant. Thanks to Matt's dedication on the subject, the Lincoln Police Department is well prepared to handle this type of event and avoid the high-profile situation that could cause civil unrest within the community. So with all that description, it's my pleasure to present Matthew Franken with the Mayor's Award of Excellence for August. Please join me in congratulating him on his hard work and commitment to the people of the city of Lincoln.
So you've just heard quite the account read by Mayor Beitler and written by Sergeant Ripley. Sergeant Ripley works with Matt. He's back here with Investigator Millicents and some other members of our organization. And I've had the pleasure to work with Matt for about 20 years in 2 different roles. My roles at the Sheriff's Office and then here at the Lincoln Police Department. His experience, his skill sets are unparalleled. We ask our employees to contribute in manners outside of their primary job assignments, and Matt does that in so many different ways. But most importantly, Matt can talk to anyone. He can develop a rapport. No matter who they are, he treats them with respect, and it helps throughout the entire investigative process. Undoubtedly, Matt's work and the long hours in the criminal division put sacrifices on his family, who is here to support Matt today, and I just really want to say that when we look at who the Lincoln Police Department is and the individuals that work for our agency, Matt represents that so very well. So thank you. Matt?
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate the nice words. I really do. I'd like to say thank you to my family, my wife, Marianne, my daughter, Kaylee, and my son, Grant. 2016 was quite a year for my team. We invested a record number of homicides. At one point during that year, I came home and my daughter met me at the doorway and said, "Where have you been? I haven't seen you in 3 days." So I'm thankful for the opportunity, though. I want to thank my teammates. I want to thank you all for hiring my chief, because in all honesty, he's the best boss that I've ever worked for, and I appreciate him very much. So thank you.
No. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Well deserved. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of the business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. Will the clerk please call the first item?
Yes, we do request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 17.
Would anyone like to speak on any of these items? Next item, please.
If not, we can vote on these items. Items 1, 2, and 5 were introduced by Camp.
So moved. Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob? Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Then items 3, 4, and 13 through 15 were introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call item 18, application of La Cabana to expand its Class I liquor license by the addition of an area measuring approximately 21 feet by 35 feet at 3223 Cornhusker Highway. Hi, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Guillermo Haro, 6000 South 88th Street.
Well, Mr. Haro, tell us about the application.
Yes, it's to just reorganize the restaurant, make it designated to a special area where we can make it more, make it more intimate, make it more restaurant-like, with booths and stuff like that.
Okay. Questions? Carl?
Yeah, I think as I read your application, you're enlarging your seating space?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 19, manager application of Michelle Erisman for Greenfields at 7900 South 87th Street.
Is anyone here to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Next is item 20, manager application of Randy Wilson for Chatters, doing business as 1640 Event Center at 1640 O Street. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm Randy Wilson, Jr., 6400 Fremont.
Why don't you tell us about your application, sir?
We're running an event center now down there at 1640. We do mostly private events. Mostly lately we work strictly with a lot of organizations from the university, try to offer a safe, fun place for them to go.
Okay. Other questions? Carl?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So, in those events from the university or other places too, it's my understanding that oftentimes they're younger people that go there, maybe people that are not 21 of age. Is that
some of those events? Yes.
Okay.
And we provide security at all times. We one of the close relationships we have with the university event groups is that we have the insurance, the security, all the things that they need to secure, to have a safe environment for them to participate in.
Okay. And so in those events, are there times when you have people when the bar's open for some people but not all people?
Yeah, strictly those are private events and no one else is allowed in, yes.
Okay. And are they wristbanded so that you know who's eligible? Okay.
Yeah. We hire a service and use that all the time.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Just wanted to expand upon that. You said organizations at the university, so would that be like the sororities, fraternities?
Yes, it includes those, yes.
Okay.
Plus other, a lot of our groups actually are international and diverse groups. We're one of the few places that are close in downtown that have the type of facility that can provide what they need without renting out a bar or a hotel or a reception hall or something that's, but yeah, we work with almost every organization with the university.
So are a lot of the events non-alcoholic?
Yes, yes.
And what's your capacity again?
Be manager.
No, I'm sorry, pardon me, people capacity of your facility.
Oh, it's 200 to 250.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 21, manager application of Donald Carey III for Wilderness Ridge LLC, doing business as Wilderness Ridge Golf Course at 1800 Wilderness Woods Place. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Donald V. Carey, 3rd, 8325 Lancashire Drive here in Lincoln, also known as Chip Carey. Can't believe you might know me.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Carey? Jane?
Mr. Carey, something about your background truly really sticks out, and it's the DUI charges that you have. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Poor choices. You live and learn a long time. My business professional career, I think you'd find, is impeccable. I've managed food and beverage operations for the last 2 here in Lincoln, Embassy Suites, as well as Yankee Hill and Highmark Golf Course. Prior to that, the last 10 years is the Renaissance Hotel next to University of Phoenix Stadium, where the Arizona Cardinals play. Professionally, I think my judgment's perfect. There have been a couple of times in the past where my personal judgment has not, and I've worked strongly to make changes in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? What kind of things have you done to correct those tendencies, perhaps we'll say, for poor choices? Because there were 4 of those.
Yeah, I think, when I was younger, I went through some things that were, stressful and poor stress management at those points in time. I think that just not putting myself in the right place at the right time. I tend to be more of a family guy, home guy anymore. Married, child, grandchild. Just don't put myself in the situations that were, not favorable for me. And also, if someone is going to be in a situation where they've had a drink or several drinks, the advent of Uber and Lyft and a few of the things like that have certainly made it much easier to be very responsible with your behavior.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 22, application of Mochara LLC, doing business as The Watering Hole, to expand its Class C liquor license by the addition of an area measuring approximately 25 feet by 130 feet at 1321 O Street.
Hello.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Brian McFarland, 3201 South Street in Lincoln.
Well, Mr. McFarland, tell us about what you're doing.
Just expanding the liquor license so that both sides of the business you can walk through the doors and use, with alcohol and not have to worry about any liquor violations.
Okay. You want to tell us anything about your business, like for the fact that you have the best wings in town?
Well, I appreciate that. That's why we need to expand, hopefully get some more seating in there.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 23, application of Pete Ricketts for governor for a special designated license to cover an indoor area measuring approximately 113 feet by 50 feet and an outdoor area measuring approximately 287 feet by 287 feet at 1421 H Street on November 4th between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. and November 24th between noon and 2 p.m. Just state, no oath on the STLs. Just state your name and address.
Okay, my name's Corbin Waldron, and my address is 505 South 20th here in Lincoln.
Okay, Mr. Waldron, tell us what we're looking at here.
Just at the governor's residence, we host tailgates before home games. We run from 3 hours before kickoff to 1 hour before kickoff. We usually have anywhere, depending on the weather and the time of kickoff, between 700 and 900 individuals at the event.
Okay, so something has changed because this has been going on for quite some time and we have not had these kind of applications for SDLs. Tell us why.
And we've had a few this year already. So in order to receive the donations from the wholesalers, we need to have an SDL. So this year so far we've had to purchase the alcohol ourselves. As it is a private event, when we purchase the alcohol, we don't need an SDL. It's a secure location with, it's not open to the public, but in order to receive a donation from the beer wholesalers, we need to have a SDL so that they can donate it appropriately.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
And for the benefit of the public, people to understand, where is this location and how long has this kind of event been going on?
This is at the governor's residence at 1425 H Street. It's been going on for 10 years, I believe. And so we're working to make sure that we do it the right way. Yeah.
Okay. Are there questions for Mr. Waldron? Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Mr. Chair, I think that's it. I would move approval of items 18 and 20 through 23.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Lyrian.
Well, generally speaking, these are pretty routine. When I joined the council, I tried to understand better what the evaluation criteria was for the council's role, given that we're not the final say on these applications. And I learned that some of the automatic disqualifiers for people applying have to do with, for a management application, have to do with Class 1 misdemeanors, any felony conviction, those kinds of things would prohibit someone from receiving the okay. But that some of the other factors to evaluate include any alcohol-related incidences, like DUIs, and more than one. I was told that more than one raises a real red flag. And so with the application for for the Wilderness Ridge Golf Course, Chip Carey, I think I'm pleased that there have been efforts to make progress, but that 4 DUIs in a series of years makes me question whether or not that's the best role to be managing the liquor license of the establishment, and so I plan to vote against that particular item, number 21.
We want to move that out of...
Pull that one out of the group.
If necessary, if that's how you'd like to do it, yeah.
Okay.
That's
So we
probably
would
the
amend it to
cleanest
be,
way.
so then my motion would be 18, 20, 22, 23.
Okay,
Okay.
so seconded by Carl. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Now,
And
will
then,
we
Mr.
act
Chair,
on 21?
I would move, well, first I'd go back to item 19. I move we hold that over till next week.
Second.
Okay, moved by John, seconded by Carl. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
And now I would move that we approve item 21.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion on this item. John?
I appreciate what my colleagues said on the past incidents, and I looked at that closely too, because Ms. Baird is right. We've had situations in the past. I guess I looked at the years, and I believe the last one was 2009, about 8 years ago, and it appears there have been no infractions during that period. The other thought I had is sometimes we put, well, this is on the manager application, we have put restrictions, I think, on managers too, that there can't be an incident in the next year or something, or that would revoke it. Does that sound right, Mr. Kirkpatrick? Or is that on the license itself?
No, we've done it on managers as well.
Okay. Well, what I would like to do is amend my motion then for approval and add the caveat or the clause that it's subject to no further incidents in the next year.
Second.
Second, moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion?
What do you think about that?
I definitely appreciate that. I think I'm still just not very comfortable with this being the right fit, but I respect that you have offered that, and I think that's a wise move.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please call the roll.
So is that a motion to amend?
On the
Or just
amendment,
We did a friendly
this is on the
amendment.
motion to amend, and then we'll vote on the
Yes.
main. Okay? So on the motion to amend.
Okay, very good. Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Sorry, can you clarify again which the
You're
part of
voting on
this?
amending it to a 1-year restriction without further incident.
Well, I'll just vote no.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1.
Now on approval of item 21, as amended.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
No.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 5-2.
Okay, next item, please.
All right, next then are public hearing resolutions. Item 24 is accepting the report of new and pending claims against the city and approving disposition of claims set forth for the period of September 16 through 30th, 2017.
Someone here to discuss this, or is someone here to protest a claim? Okay, if you're here to talk about a claim, please come forward right now.
Please state your name and address.
My name is Zohal Said. My address 515 West Sandra, apartment 23, zip code 68521.
Thank you.
Okay, could you step just a little closer to the microphone so we can hear you a little bit better?
Okay.
Tell us about your claim.
What happened is the trees fell in my car and damaged my car. And then I called, they tell me I have to write what happened, and then I have to send some picture. But when that happened, I called the cops, and then the cops, he take some picture too.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff, would you come forward and talk about this a little bit?
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. This was one of a series of tree claims we received for damages related to tree branches falling because of a very significant storm that came through Lincoln. This was on August 20th. And as she stated, her car was parked on O Street, right across the street from the community college campus on O Street. A branch broke off of one of the street trees and came down on her car and did a significant amount of damage. Including breaking her windshield and denting I think the hood and the side of her car. The trees there are not huge, but obviously it was big enough to cause a significant amount of damage. We evaluated her claim as we do all tree claims, and the question is, was there either a complaint about the tree being injured or damaged prior to the tree branch falling, or was it something that should have been so obvious to do an inspection? We don't have an inspection policy. This is somewhat different than other tree claims because being in the downtown area, we actually have a contract with the downtown association for tree maintenance. And so we did notify them of the claim, but the fact of the matter is this tree appeared to be perfectly healthy prior to the damage being caused. And in fact, when you look at the pictures of the tree, of the branch on the car, the branches on the sidewalk next to the car, there's leaves on them because it was a healthy branch, and it was just a matter of unfortunate amount of wind, and the tree, although not apparently weak, was weak enough where the branch fell and caused the damage. And so because we didn't receive any reports of a problem with the tree prior to this problem, that's why we're recommending that this particular claim be denied by the city.
Okay, questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jeff, after this is all taken, the vote is taken, could you discuss with the young lady what her options are at that point?
Sure.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 25, approving the award of contract to the low bidder for the agreement between the city and the State Department of Transportation for the 48th and Highway 2 traffic signal rebuild project.
Good afternoon. I'm Erin Sokoluk with Public Works and Utilities. As she mentioned, this is a project that will rebuild the traffic signal at 48th and Highway 2. It's a federal aid project that was let through NDOT. Bids opened on the 19th. And the low bidder is Watts Electric Company for an amount of $247,437.15. The resolution before you today needs to be amended to include who the low bidder is, and that will then authorize the mayor to sign the contract when NDOT sends it over.
Okay, questions? Thank you very much.
Excuse me,
Oh,
Chair.
John?
And just for the record, since it's a federal project, is that a 90-10 matching?
It's an 80-20.
80-20, so the city pays 20 and the...
Correct.
And is it the state or the federal pays the 80?
The federal funds will come up at the 80%.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 26, approving the First Amendment to the development agreement for the reconfiguration of South Point Pavilions between the city and Red Capital Management, LLC, to make amendments to the real estate interests to be conveyed between the parties in furtherance of the development agreement on property generally located north and east of the intersection of South 27th and Pine Lake Road.
Good afternoon, Tim C., City Law Department. What you have before you is a First Amendment to the development agreement for the South Point and Shields project that was originally approved in February of 2016. The purpose of the agreement comes to us for the fact that the developer, when we wrote the original agreement, anticipated that they would have a private third party purchasing the bond that would fund the parking garage. In anticipation of that, the structure that was set up was that the city would actually own the underlying ground that the garage would be constructed on, and that was fine with the developer and the eventual bond holder at that time. Since that time, the third party has indicated that they're not interested in purchasing that bond anymore. The developer has had to work with a more traditional lender, a bank. The bank would like a security interest in the underlying property in order to finance that type of a project. And so the amendments to the agreement in front of you would reflect a change in the ownership structure of the underlying ground, and that is that the developer would continue to own the underlying ground. The city would construct the garage on an easement that would be granted to the city, allowing us to own, construct, operate the garage throughout the useful life of the garage. And so what you'll see throughout the changes in the amendment are things such as ensuring an easement interest as opposed to ensuring the marketability of the general title of the property. You'll see such things as a change in the property taxes and assessments section, because when we would purchase a property or when property is acquired, there would be a provision as to who is going to pay for the property taxes prior to closing. Where the developer will continue to own the underlying property, they will continue with the duty to pay some property taxes on that, or whatever is assessed on that underlying property. So that's what you have before you. On the map, you'll see the Shields building is being constructed off here to the east. The garage lot, as we have described it, is this cross-hatched area here. Again, the developer would continue to own this property, and then the city would be granted an easement allowing us to construct the garage in that area. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Cindy and John.
So the city will actually now be doing the bonding, is that right?
The city was always the one that would be issuing the bond.
Okay, and so how do we bond an easement?
Well, we're bonding for construction of the garage. We're bonding against the revenue stream created by the occupation tax at the South Point project.
But we only own an easement, the city, instead of the garage itself? I guess
No, we continue to own the garage. We don't own the land underneath the garage. We have an easement that sits on top of that underlying ground, and then the garage is constructed on the easement.
Okay, and I seem to remember in the original plans that they were looking at maybe retail space on that first floor, that garage. Is that still part of the plan?
That's still part of the plan.
And then that would be there would be an occupation tax involved in those shops as well?
That's correct.
And then who would be the owner of those shops?
The developer would be the owner of those shops.
Okay, but we would still have the underlying land?
The easement would be structured such that those could continue to exist underneath the first deck of the garage.
Okay, but the developer would be the one leasing those spaces?
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
John?
Thank you, Mr. C. It's a little confusing here because, and now as you mentioned too, the first floor retail shops would still be retained ownership by the developer. So, we can't move a garage. It seems to me in the past we've had situations where maybe there's been a lease on the underlying land and then you bond against that. But here it's just a pure easement. It's kind of strange. It seemed to me when we put this together originally that part of the reason the city would own that land was to help facilitate the transaction and the use of the TIF for that.
Well, let's be clear, there's no TIF involved here.
I'm sorry, not TIF, but the bonding. I'm sorry, using that occupation tax.
So if there's no TIF involved, there's no property taxes that we're talking about paying for the bond. The bond is strictly issued against the occupation tax revenue, which remains the same whether or not we own a fee interest in the land or an easement interest in the land. The occupation tax will continue to go forward.
Okay. Now, will these be taxable bonds then?
I believe it was written that they could be either. I don't recall the specifics on the. I don't recall the specifics on that, Councilman Camp. I can get you a better answer on that.
Yeah, it seems like that might be part of the equation here too.
That could become, but it's still a city-owned garage. It's just a garage owned in an easement. This isn't the first time we've done a garage on an easement. The Marketplace garage at, I believe, 10th and Q is a city-owned garage constructed on an easement at that location.
I thought on that garage we just swapped where the Journal Star got 65 parking spots in perpetuity.
In looking at the Register of Deeds, it's built on an easement.
Is it a perpetual easement?
Yeah, it's a easement that goes on for the life of the garage, so.
Okay. Well, Benny, then Larry.
John, thank you, Mr. Chair. John touched on a lot of my questions. The easement was really confusing me. So they own the property, we're going to build on the property, but we can't be evicted because we have the easement.
We have an easement.
Okay. That was my, who owns it and what happens if we have a falling out?
Yeah.
Okay, Larry?
I'm just curious if there are any fiscal implications for the city. You've described how the city will no longer take title to the land, so it'll just remain in the developer's hands. So it sounds like property taxes will remain.
The responsibility of the
whatever small sliver comes in remains kind of
if there's an
similar.
implication, it's that there's actually more taxable property here than there would have been under the prior scheme.
But no other financial
No other
implications to
financial.
the structure of the occupation tax or anything?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next are our public hearing ordinances second reading. Item 27, change of zone 17022, application of the Lux Center for the Arts to designate the former University Place City Hall as a landmark, changing the zoning district from B3 commercial to B3 commercial with a landmark overlay on property generally located at 2601 North 48th Street.
Ed Zimmer, Planning Department. Bringing you an item, pretty straight up landmark designation of a building that, as I've introduced this to Preservation Commission and Planning Commission, I think both were surprised that it was not already designated a landmark. This is the City Hall building of the independent town of University Place, independent until its annexation by Lincoln in 1926. Was built in 1914, 1915. Designed by the University Place resident and Lincoln and University Place architect John R. Smith. Probably his first major public building, although he also built the library in University Place and some of their schools. I think entirely recognizable from a 1923 image of the building. It housed all of their departments, fire station, police station, mayor's office, water and lights, and council chamber, as well as a space upstairs they called the auditorium. It continued to serve as a Lincoln fire station for decades after the annexation, and then in the 1980s was purchased by 86-year-old Gladys Lux, then Professor Emeritus, who had been the art department at Nebraska Wesleyan for about 40 years. She deeded it over to the Lincoln Community Foundation. This was Gladys Lux in her earlier years. She lived to 104, and after her death, the art center that had been established as a joint venture with Nebraska Wesleyan was named for her. I think we recognize it as a clear landmark civic building. Is recommended to you unanimously by the Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission. Because the Lux Center has expanded into an adjacent building, which is originally a mid-1950s bakery that I would guess probably served very well for the fire station beside it. The footprint that we're including in the landmark designation is both buildings because they really function together. They really are one property. I don't think there's any doubt that it's recognizable as a City Hall building, or that the quality of its architecture is other than quite distinguished. Inside, the spaces are used as the art gallery and for classrooms and offices, but there still are I think, fine features, including the safe, a bit of the jail cell, and the staircase that leads from the first floor up to the second. We don't typically designate interior features on the landmark buildings, but this does have some interior period elements as well as a very clear, distinguished exterior. This comes to you as a request of the Lux Center for the Arts, and we recommend its approval.
All right, other questions? Carl.
Yeah, Ed, could you explain a little bit about why they need this designation?
I believe in addition to their pride in the building and their clear stewardship of it for decades, they're engaged in a major capital campaign, and they are close to achieving their goals. As a designated property, carrying out a quality rehabilitation, which they would do under the guidelines of the designation, they can qualify potentially for state income tax credits, which can be marketed to others and can hopefully help close the remaining gap on their capital campaign. So it protects the building, but also offers them a financial incentive that will help in its rehabilitation.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 28, change of zone 17024, application of John and Terry Thomas to designate the Burgess House as a landmark, changing the zoning district from AG Agricultural to AG Agricultural with landmark overlay on property generally located at 6501 Southwest 40th Street.
Stacy Hageman, Planning Department. This is also for landmark designation of the Burgess Farmstead. This property is located, this is Southwest 40th Street, just north of Denton Road. And we're looking west here, so the house faces east. You can see the dense windbreak of mature trees around the house, the original barn just southwest of the house. Joseph and Annie Burgess immigrated to the United States from England, and by 1883 they owned 240 acres of land in this area. And Joseph was a successful farmer on this property for 40 years until they passed the property down to their son, Joseph, also Joseph. Here is a picture of the Burgess family in 1929 with Joseph and Annie in the center and 10 of their children, 9 of which all remained in the same area. The current house, you can see here under construction, this is an image of the barn, and then the current house is being constructed just a year after the previous house was finished, because that house was destroyed by a fireworks display that set fire to it. The previous house was said to be one of the finest in Lancaster County, right after William Jennings Bryan's Fairview. So this house was built on the same site as the previous house, and it remained in the family's ownership, or still remains in the family's ownership. The application is by John and Terry Thomas, and John is a great-grandson of Joseph and Annie. The house is American Foursquare. It shows the significance of the family and their prosperity in Lincoln, also the size of their family with 6 bedrooms on the second floor where typically there would be 4. And here's the side view of the house. So there's a full front porch on the front, a smaller enclosed porch on the side, and this nice 2-story bay window feature. So this landmark designation was taken to Historic Preservation Commission and Planning Commission, who both unanimously recommended its approval. So, any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Wait,
please come forward. Got to jump up quick or I'll move on.
John and Terry Thomas, 6501 Southwest 40th. We're the owners of the property. And I don't think we have too much to add to the nice presentation that was done other than to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you very much for being here. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 29, change of zone 17026, application of Magnum Properties LLC for a change from H3 Highway Commercial to I1 Industrial on property generally located at 235 South Coddington Avenue.
David Carey with the Planning Department, here on behalf of the applicant on this item. This location is, the proposal is to have a change of zone from H3 to I1 at this location, and as you'll see from this location, it is an area that is surrounded by other I zoning. This is the intent is to allow for more uses to be operated on this site. This is an item that came through the Planning Commission, was approved unanimously on the consent agenda. I would point out that there was some question and some information about the location of some existing residential, but not in residential zoning, that is within the typical 300 feet that the Health Department and the city normally would not approve of industrial zoning within that distance of a residential. But the overall land use plan for this area is to go towards industrial and commercial uses, and the Health Department did review this and signed off on this change of zone with that. To be clear that those existing residences are in commercial zoning at this time, and is therefore deemed to be appropriate for being within that 300 feet. So I can answer any questions at this time.
Questions? Marion.
I just want to clarify what you just said, because I asked the question, because we obviously don't like to see residential in industrial zoning, but we're very close to it. There are some restrictions. The staff report mentioned that the Health Department was okay because they weren't zoned residential.
Correct.
But really what I think we discovered they meant is that they're already that close to industrial zoning today.
We're not making the situation any worse.
This will not make the situation any worse.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 30, change of zone 17027, application of Hepburn Properties LLC for a change from P public use to H3 highway commercial on property generally located at 200 Northwest 84th Street.
David Carey with the Planning Department. Here to explain that what we have here is what would be deemed more or less as a cleanup item, but needing to go through a change of zone to go from P zoning to H3 zoning in the area. Went through the consent agenda for approval from the Planning Commission. The point to be made here is that this was previously owned by a school district. At the change of ownership back in the 90s, this probably should have been changed for zoning to more of a commercial use. Did not happen at that time. What we've identified through this process is that this was still P zoning, should be something different than that, and that's what the appropriate zoning that's proposed is here in front of you today.
Okay, any questions? What's on the property right now?
Right now, there was some history done on that there was the most recent use there was a daycare in the building with some parking, but there hasn't been, my understanding is that there hasn't been a lot of activity there recently.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Next is item 31, annexation 17013, amending the Lincoln corporate limits map by annexing approximately 4 acres of property generally located at 84th Street and Pioneers Boulevard.
Good afternoon, David Carey with the Planning Department. I'd like to just kick off this this round of proposed annexations that are before you today. We do have 4 proposed annexations under separate submittals. What we'll have here today is a review by Paul Barnes, our long-range planning manager, with some additional information provided by Andrew Theroff from our office on the details of each proposal. I will note that the entire package of annexations was brought before you for a briefing on September 18th, so we did have a chance to talk to you about this and give you some background information. These items that you have before you today were heard before the Planning Commission on September 27th. All were approved to move forward to you for action and hearing today. Action next week, hearing today. I would also just point out that the process to this point has been following what is stated as our process in our comprehensive plan, being a very public process to provide information to both the landowners and the community. And so we are at this stage now where we would like you to consider these for annexation. We will also have a few more items coming before you in future hearings in front of the council We have broken this down to have more manageable meetings, just to be clear on that. So you've received information on the full package. Now you'll have a run of meetings now where you have a number of different hearings in front of you. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Paul Barnes. He'll provide some background information.
David, do you want me to call the rest of the items so you can speak on all of the items together?
I don't think that's necessary, simply because we've set it up to not have to do that, actually.
Okay,
so,
very good.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Paul Barnes with the Planning Department. As David said, I'm going to give kind of a background and overview of how we got to today in terms of the study, and this conversation will apply to all of the areas, although they will be called separately. Back in the mid-1990s, the City Council at that time had asked the Planning Department to put together a process for an annexation study. So this is something that's been in place and in our policy documents for quite some time. We know that Lincoln's a growing community. We have consistent growth, 1.2 to 1.3% annually. That's 3,000 to 4,000 people coming to our community every year. A lot of that development has to happen on the edge of the city, although we do have infill that's happening as well. We know that our city limits are expanding and our boundary is growing. So in order to accommodate that growth and be orderly and efficient, and for other reasons that I'll go through, we are completing this annexation study. The last study was completed in 2008. So kind of to start off here, we look to the state statutes that lay out our powers as a city of the primary class. Different class cities have different powers given to them for annexation. And what we have here for Lincoln is that the City Council may, by ordinance at any time, include within its city limits land that is contiguous or adjacent in any direction as may be deemed proper. So this is where we start with in terms of our policy in bringing this forward to you. A few of the reasons that I just wanted to touch on for annexation, in this case city-initiated annexation, is that we want to make sure that there's equity for all taxpayers. You'll see in these cases that there's land that's contiguous on multiple sides. They may have a driveway on a city street. They may have a trail or other city-paid improvement near them or within their neighborhood that they do get advantage in using. So we're talking about equity and making sure that everybody's paying a fair share. Also, we are clarifying service areas. You'll see some of these areas have a city jurisdiction, then it switches over to county, say along a road. So in terms of maintenance and response for emergency services, there's a clarification in doing this type of annexation as well. And then third there, just making sure that we have orderly and efficient growth. We know that we have a concurrency policy in our comprehensive plan that means we won't provide city services outside of the city limits. We want to make sure that we have that consistent growth pattern that's orderly and efficient as we do that. So taking what we have in the state statute, we then refine it and have included it in the city-county comprehensive plan. So this is the community's vision of what we see fit for this annexation study. A couple points here. We note that existing residential areas should be respected as much as possible. There aren't other zoning actions or changes accompanying this. This is solely the annexation process. With the entire package, we did have some acreage areas, and we're charged with taking additional steps with those areas. And so at the end of August, we held 4 public meetings, basically in each kind of quadrant or sub-area that we were studying. And although they were focused on certain areas, they were open to the public and anybody could attend. We also put together a website, had all of our meeting materials. The study that was put together, that document was available on the website as well. So within these areas, we know that a lot of these things will remain unchanged, but there will be some cost to these people that as they're annexed, the city levy will kick in. I do want to note that as part of that discussion that we've had, and in a matter of timing, we are on a timeline that if council does take action on these annexations yet in 2018, the city levy and that additional tax would not be paid until 2019. So that would actually kick in next year in 2018, paid 2019. Just a couple more points here. This is where we get down to more of our criteria. Again, this is all from the city-county comprehensive plan. We should be annexing land that's in priority B. That's land that's in the future service limit that is going to or has city services available and can develop up to the year 2025 or so. This land is generally urban in character, which is in addition to the land use. As the city's continuing to grow, that character of that land is changing and it becomes more conducive for urban type development. Also, we should be annexing land that's engulfed by the city. We do have one of those locations on the agenda today. So land that doesn't meet these criteria, it's further out, it's rural in character, we're not studying those. Those actually fell off of the recommendation. So these are the actual criteria or methodology pieces that come from the comprehensive plan. Again, drilling down a little further from that state statute. So land in Tier 1, priorities A and B, land engulfed by the city, land contiguous to the city limits and urban zoning, and also land that's contiguous to the city limits in ag zoning, but the basic infrastructure or city infrastructure is there and it's therefore urban in character. Going through this exercise in the study, we found that these properties here all met at least one of those criteria. So this is thousands of acres of land. We said that's a lot. Maybe we need to take another look at this. We drilled this down and actually found that there were 8 sub-areas that met at least 2 or more of these criteria. And our approach this time was to really select and recommend those areas that were more clear-cut. They had, the infrastructure is there in place, and once annexed, it's easy to serve these properties. So, we are presenting these 8 before you with the first 4 today. With that, I'll move on to this specific area. Just a couple of points to note. This area is near Pioneers and South 84th Street. What we're looking at here are these 2 blue areas. This white here is in the city limits. So these are actually portions of lots that are in city limits when the back portion in blue is not. This was on consent to the Planning Commission meeting, and the Commission did vote and unanimously supported that annexation. Turn over to Andrew.
Andrew Theroff, Planning Department. I'll just provide a couple more details on this particular annexation.
Excuse me 1 second while you have that up. Did you say everything around it has engulfed it? You said the white area, and I don't...
The white is the city, so this is not this dark area. Everything else is in the city. This particular annexation is somewhat of a unique situation from the other 4 annexations. As we mentioned, this red area is a single premises. There's the house here, and it's just part of that property. The rear yard is not in the city now. You can kind of see there's actually even a storage building that appears to be half in the city, half out. It's kind of an odd situation. And then the blue area to the south is part of St. Mark's Church. So St. Mark's is here, and then there's just the northeast corner of their property was outside of the city. So we look at this as kind of a minor cleanup action, a little different than our other annexations. With that, I guess we'll take any questions.
Questions? Jane.
Paul, when you talk about annexations, I know that constituents and neighbors get concerned about the costs. There'll be the property tax rate that they will have to pay. But for those properties that are not on city water or city sanitary sewer, how how do those residents pay for it? Can they choose not to go with city water and city sewer? And if they do, how do they make payments for that work that needs to get done?
Right, so I think what you're referring to would be described under an assessment district process. So as I said, with the concurrency policy that we have currently and have had in place for years, we do not provide city services outside of the city limits. So once these properties are annexed, if they would like to request water and sewer, there is a process to create an assessment district to do that. And they would be working with our Public Works and Utilities staff to develop that application. I believe for utility assessment districts, one person from an area could come forward and request that. There's not a minimum required number of petitions. In something like a roads assessment district, I think you need the majority to sign that petition. So that would be installed, and there would be bonds for that would be paid for over a period of time.
So a property owner, I guess with other assessment districts, they have, is it 7 to 10 years to pay for that?
I think it depends on the type of improvement.
Okay.
In some cases could be up to 20 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, John?
So on that top blue smaller square that you want to add, you said that's part of a larger parcel.
Yeah.
And it had a storage building on both sides. So it's within the 3-mile limit, but what happens, say, somebody falls and hurts themselves on the proposed area and it's not in the city? Does Deputy Chief Pat Boer run out in an ambulance to help them, or do we do mutual aid from the county, or what happens?
And this is one of those kind of odd situations that Paul talked about. Technically, this wouldn't be an LFR jurisdiction, but this blue square doesn't have a separate address, so when the call goes out, I mean, it'd probably be addressed from this house, so it probably would be Lincoln Fire and Rescue responding to that.
And would the same apply for the police department?
Yeah, probably, because it'd be addressed off the house, which is already in the city, so we wouldn't know when responding to that it's technically this back piece of their lot that's not in the city.
Okay. And maybe this, my last question goes overall to this and the other annexations and future ones. We hear, or at least I hear from constituents that are facing annexation, say, well, gee, we don't have these city services, we're paying more, and but with the annexation. So how do we generally respond? Or they may even be required to hook up to the city, or extra costs that they don't really need. But I guess that's sort of a two-part question. What do you say to them that, you know, maybe in 10 years they'll get all the services, but we're going to tax you now? And
yeah, so one thing we would say for all these annexations we've identified, residents are getting benefits of city services today. In every case, they're needing to drive on city streets to go anywhere, to get out of their subdivision. In terms of the cost for sewer and water, with any new development, that's part of the cost of your lot. The developer pays for that, and that's passed along to the homeowner when they buy their lot. So a way to look at it is that everyone in the city is paying for their sewer and water. Usually it's not as visible as an assessment district, but everyone is paying that cost when they buy their lot. So when these areas get annexed, they would be paying the same cost that everyone else paid. They'll be paying for their local sewer and water lines.
Miriam?
My question isn't specific to this one, but to this package of annexations. Did you look at emergency services in terms of a trade-off that might be made as people come into the city? For instance, I received a letter about one of the particular annexations saying that today their emergency response time is actually better with a rural fire district than it would be with LFR, because right now they are outside that 4-minute emergency response time. How did you evaluate those kinds of public safety issues for the people who are affected by the annexations?
Assistant Chief Boer has been involved with our conversations on these areas, you know, very heavily, because that is an important discussion that we need to have. And he is in attendance and can maybe address this in more particular, if you'd like.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Pat Boer, Assistant Chief, Lincoln Fire. You're welcome. Glad to be here. When Andrew and Paul and myself and others from various departments had open houses, met with residents about annexations. There's a common question, what's in it for me? And what I tried to explain was the performance of Lincoln Fire and Rescue and our cardiac save rate, our save rate with dollars from fire. And it's true that in some of the annexation areas, there is a station closer to them than a Lincoln Fire Station. But I think most of the council knows about response time. Those stations may be occupied maybe once a week or 2 or 3 times a month. But other than that, the person who responds to that district responds from their home. And so Lincoln Fire and Rescue has a huge advantage in response time, because our response time starts when the call goes off in the station. Their response time starts at home. We don't know where they live. We don't know where the members of the volunteer fire districts live. So even though there is a fire station close by, most of the time it is unoccupied. And so to compare the fire station location is not a good comparison.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Thank you. Are there other questions on this item or other things you want to tell us about this item? Just as a clarification, this really is a cleanup issue on this particular annexation. As we look at the southern part of that, which is St. Mark's, even after it's annexed, that's just a field and a garage there right now. And as it's owned by a church, they won't be paying property taxes.
Yep.
It's just a cleanup item.
And I think for this too, it fell within our criteria. It was part of the entire process. We looked at all of the properties that met those, so it does meet those criteria as well.
Okay. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 32, annexation 17011, annexing approximately 161 acres at South 40th and Yankee Hill Road.
Okay, this annexation, we have a map here. Yeah, go ahead. So this annexation is near Yankee Hill and South 40th. The Super Target development would be here. So this is the Yankee Hill Golf Course, and then we do have one single-family home located here. A couple of points that I'll just kind of hit on and then turn it over to Andrew. I'll kind of start with this property, which was and still is owned by the Spidell family and was a farm of a much larger area. Actually, over time, that farm has been, that land has been sold off for development. So you see kind of this development that's happened up here, and also with the golf course, that was once part of the farmland. So over time, this area has been urbanizing and developing. At the Planning Commission meeting, their recommendation was for unanimous approval.
Some details on this area. It is 161 acres. It is 2 properties, as Paul mentioned, Yankee Hill Golf Course and then the residential property. With the golf course, the clubhouse is actually in the city already, so this would just be the playing area of the golf course. A couple other things to note specific to this one. The golf course is a rural water district customer, and the residential property is in the rural water district boundary, but they're not a customer. So there would be a payment associated with this annexation. We have an agreement with rural water district based on the idea that they're losing customer base when we annex. So with this particular annexation, we would owe the rural water district about $9,000 upon annexation. There's an additional fee on top of that. It starts at $6,666 for the existing customer, which is the golf course. Every year they stay on rural water, and they can stay on rural water, but every year they stay on rural water, that goes down by 10%. So after 10 years, that $6,000 payment would be 0. But we would have the $9,000 payment upon annexation. There is water essentially in the northwest, south of here. There's sewer available on the north side, and then there's sewer now on the south side of Yankee Hill, too. So infrastructure is available. Do we have any questions?
John?
So following that on the, pardon me, the water service and all being on rural water right now, and with, even they pay the $9,000 up front, but that $6,600 goes down to nothing after, like you said, 10 years. Why would they ever want to change? Or are we going to force them to?
We will not force them to, probably. If a bunch of other customers in this area disconnect from rural water, rural water may not want to have a big line going out there just to serve one person. But yes, typically they can choose to stay on rural water. They're actually just using it for their maintenance building right now.
So they have their own well for irrigation?
The golf course irrigation as well, but yeah, their maintenance building has rural water. I think city water is a little cheaper, so that would be their incentive to potentially want to switch over. But yeah, I don't know that there's a big incentive for them right now to switch from rural water.
So what is your rule of thumb on annexations and the requirement to switch to our water system versus staying on a rural water or staying on wells?
We don't have any requirement really. So let's say all of these properties to the east are on rural water, and there's a rural water line that goes out here to serve this one property. If all of these properties were annexed and got an assessment district to get city water, it may make sense from our side and the rural water side just to say, well, there's no more rural water lines over here. Let's just switch this other customer over to city water. I don't know if there's any strict policy on that. It's just the idea that when rural water is extending rural water lines into the city, they want to make sure there's a certain amount of customers that are using that. So as their customer base switches to city water, it's more convenient for them just to not have one or two customers remaining on rural water. And for us, when city water lines are extended to an area, we would like the customer to connect to city water as well.
I would say that there are some benefits, though, that are pretty clear, that when you have city water available next to your property, there's hydrants there too. And so you get that fire protection benefit as well. In the rural water district lines, although they can serve those properties, they don't have the pressure and the capacity to hook up to the LFR equipment and provide that service.
Any other questions? Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Steve Spidell, 7800 South 40th, Lincoln, 68516. I'm the owner of the northwest portion of this annexation. My grandfather moved to this farm 100 years ago this year, in 1917. I have lived now and farmed this property for 47 years, since 1970. I farm this a little different than what you would maybe most farms would be. It's a very intense type of farming. Each year I'm harvesting about 1,000 pounds of brome grass seed. I'm baling around 500 bales of grass hay. I'm growing large ear corn, which all goes to Hy-Vee year-round for squirrel corn. And I'm supplying about 3,500 corn stalks to 12 stores in Lincoln this time of year that they sell for fall decoration. All that takes a huge amount of labor and some diligent marketing, but over the years these crops have been producing enough income to pay my property taxes. However, if this land's annexed, there isn't any legal crops that I'm going to be able to grow there that are going to come close to covering the much higher property taxes. Part of the problem, or part of the reason, would be the difference in Norris schools and Lincoln schools. The levy's higher in Lincoln. Adding the Lincoln levy, so as I can tell, the mill levy for me will go up about approximately 30%. But the main increase is in the valuation. Right now I'm ag with a greenbelt valuation, so my ag land is valued at about $3,000 an acre for tax purposes. Rob Ogden at the county assessor's office has told me if I'm annexed, it will probably go to $40,000 to $50,000 per acre. So I'm going to have a huge increase in the property taxes. This particular property is not urban in character. We got the big red historic landmark barn, a machine shed, a very large corn crib and bins. I have a full line of farm equipment there. I have 4 tractors there. I have a combine there. I've got tillage equipment, hay equipment, sprayers, a seed cleaner, fertilizer applicator, a seeder. So none of that justifies calling it urban in character. I was told by city staff that they were annexing because they can provide sewer now. I don't have any need for a sewer in a cornfield or a hayfield. And Yankee Hill Golf Course has no need for sewer on a golf course. I do not plan to move from this property at all, and I certainly do not intend to put houses around my house as long as I'm alive. And it's important that you know that I have an easement and a restrictive covenant on the golf course land, that nothing can be built from my property south all the way to Yankee Hill Road, and that entire area has to be maintained and used exclusively as a golf course. So Yankee Hill Golf Course is not going to disappear or change either, at least for as long as I am there. So since houses are not going to be built here for at least the foreseeable future, I don't consider this to be an appropriate time for the annexation. We're not totally surrounded by the city. The entire east side is 160 acres of unannexed acreages. And I believe the staff report says that that area is not appropriate for annexation at this time, probably not until sometime after 2025. Now, I do understand if that area is annexed sometime in the future, that Yankee Hill Golf Course and I would be automatically annexed at that time. So, because my property is currently intensely farmed, is not urban in character, will not be developed before 2025, is not surrounded by the city, and because of the much higher property taxes, which would be very problematic for me, I submit that annexation is not appropriate now. So I urge you to not approve annexation of my property in the Yankee Hill Golf Course at this time.
Other questions for Mr. Speidel? Thank you, sir. You've made a cogent case.
Do you want me to sign these?
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Would you like to read? Okay.
My name is Richard Halverson, live at 6311 Inverness Road, and the only thing I do is testify in sympathy of Mr. Speidel. I come from a farming family, and I know we had at least 80 acres as prime, could have been, maybe developed. My dad said, I don't care if you pave it with $20 bills, I'm not selling. Well, luckily we're so far out of the town that it can be annexed. I agree with them, this is not urban in nature, it is rural in nature. There are no homes encroaching on this area at this time, and in the future, this probably should be annexed. And in the future, I'm sure, even if you don't vote, it will be annexed. But at this time, I agree with it. If he's going to use this for farming, actually, you'll probably be forced to go to some sort of development if you annex it. And I think you should hold off now and wait till maybe there's some more development in the area and then annex at that point. Thank you.
Okay, would the city staff like a rebuttal?
Okay, I think we're going to kind of share these points in the rebuttal here. First of all, I just wanted to kind of bring us back to the state statute and just say that, some properties are surrounded, some properties are engulfed. In this case, from Nebraska state statute, we need to be contiguous. We need to be touching existing city limits. I think the case gets stronger as you are contiguous on multiple sides, which in this case the properties are. So again, being contiguous is the key, which we are. The other thing that I think is kind of a theme in this conversation is the idea of urban character. And as I said earlier, urban character isn't solely based on use, and although the owner is using this for farm, crops, and that type of a thing, it's not just based on that use, it's based on its location and the characteristics of the area that have developed around it. We have a very urban neighborhood in this location. You can see all of these, townhomes that are approved. I pointed out the shopping center. Andrew has also talked about the location of the utilities. All of those characteristics support that idea that this is urban in character. And we point to several Nebraska Supreme Court cases over the years, and that has been consistently defined. There is this urban versus rural in character, and not solely based on use, but also these other attributes, where this property is located and what's happening around it. I will note one more thing, and then I'll pass it off to Andrew. We did take a look at these acreages to the east. That's actually in a different priority area, meaning according to our growth tiers, we will be able to serve that area with city services, water and sewer further into the future. As part of this annexation study process, we will be looking at areas like that again a couple years out. That will likely be one that will be reviewed again at that time.
And I just wanted to touch on Greenbelt a little bit because that was mentioned. So yes, the residential property is a Greenbelt property right now. So what that means is the assessor's office assesses that at its ag value, imagining that it doesn't have any other development potential. So since it's being used for ag purposes on Greenbelt, it's actually assessed at 75% of its ag value right now. If it were annexed, it would lose Greenbelt status. That's state statute. So once it loses Greenbelt status, it would be assessed at its full value. If it's used for ag, it would be, I think, assessed at 75% of that full value, but you would have that change from ag value to full value, which could be a big change. But looking at it from an equity perspective, it would be assessed the same way as all of the surrounding properties around him are assessed, the same way as all the properties in the city are assessed. So yes, there could be a big increase, but that would be because the assessor's office determined his property is worth that amount. So,
John?
What would your answer be to Mr. Spidell noting there the property that's the acreages of perhaps waiting till that time, so maybe a few more years down the road, and then have the whole last amount done, since he is so active in an agricultural and a specialized agricultural fashion?
I would point out a few things. In fact, I think that this property has benefited from being this close to the city for some time. We have an improved South 40th Street there's an arterial facility. That costs a lot of money to improve and maintain, and having that type of facility at your front door, using that daily whenever you come or go, is something that, takes money. I think the other thing is we have utilities almost all the way around this area in terms of fire hydrants and water lines, and now we have a large sanitary sewer in Yankee Hill, and so these things together are really defining that this property is urban in character. It's acting like other property that's already within Lincoln. I don't think that we need to wait for additional time until this is annexed. That will be looked at in the future, and that'll have its own review and set of circumstances.
And I'd also like to go back to your recitation of the state statute and talking about engulfing and some of those things. And I take those to be somewhat criteria or thought process, but not mandatory. Is that a fair analysis?
Yes, I think what we do is we follow with what that says, and we're not doing anything contrary to the state statute. I think that would be a bad thing. I think that it's been challenged if you do a corridor or a strip annexation to get out to a certain piece of land. And I think if you're not urban in character, if you really truly are removed and remote from the city and you are rural as defined by the Supreme Court, then I think that would be a bad thing. In this case, we're not. We're meeting those criteria and multiple of them.
But those are, I'd almost like to use the word guidelines. If we didn't annex this right now, we wouldn't necessarily be violating state statute. Is that correct?
Well, this is our process, is to go before the elected officials and have this decision, so.
But, yeah, we're not required to annex them per state statute.
I would add, David Carey with the Planning Department. I would just add, John, you had a good question. I think I wanted to be, one more point of clarification. So when we talk about the trunk sewer line being available to now sewer this property that up until recently was not available, which was a change in the status of this property recently, which is why, one more big reason why it does make sense to annex it. There is a little more uncertainty as to how this area would get sewered, which differentiates the properties from that point of view. So that is why it would make sense for this property, the acreage property to the east, to not be annexed at this time versus this property right next door being annexed at this time. And it has everything to do with that trunk sewer line being available now on the south side.
But is the purpose of that trunk sewer, why was it put in? Was it for the golf course? I mean, what are they going to have sewered?
It's part of our sewer plan. The area to the south which is already annexed and under development. So that needed the trunk sewer to serve that land with our concurrency policy. So what we do with our plans for the sewer plan is to extend the line so that the next area of land that could be developed with that extension has access to it. So that is exactly what we've done to this point now. So I just want to make sure that it was clear on that point.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Thank you. Next item, please.
Next is item 33, annexation 17012, annexing approximately 32 acres of property generally located at Southwest 1st Street and West Denton Road.
Thank you. Paul Barnes with the Planning Department. This area is near the approved Southwest Village commercial development. So again, on this map, you'll see in the blue, this is the proposed annexation area. It does include some of the Highway 77 right-of-way. This plan was approved 10 or so years ago for commercial development in this area. It is serviced by utilities and ready to develop at that time that it does. I will note one other item kind of related to this. You'll see over here that this is actually Wilderness Park. The property we're talking about, again in blue, is contiguous to existing city limits on 3 sides. Wilderness Park, based on our growth tiers and when we can provide services, water and sewer, that's actually in Tier 2. And so that's beyond the year 2040 of when that would happen, when those services would be available. There are also a couple of private residences that are near the park. We did kind of talk about, is this time for annexation of this area? If we were to do that, a couple of things could happen. One, we'd annex private residences that we couldn't get sewer and water to. Or 2, they would become an island or completely engulfed by the city, which is kind of anti our policy.
So specific to this annexation, it's 32 acres. About half of that is actually just public right-of-way. The property is used for a tree farm or a former tree farm. Something unique about this one, there would be a fire district payment per state statute. When we're taking district area from some of the rural fire districts, there is a payment for that. It's based on a calculation based on the net debt of the fire district. Most of the other fire districts don't have a net debt, so there's no payment to them. This is Southwest Rural Fire, and they do. So the payment would be $343 upon annexation. And water and sewer is available almost directly to the west here in First/Amaranth. So.
Okay, questions?
Is this the land that was set up for Walmart potentially at one time, or?
Yeah, the surrounding area up here was. Yeah, that's when all of the surrounding area was annexed in 2006, which was tied to that.
Okay, other questions? Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Marion, go ahead.
This one wasn't unanimous at Planning Commission. Can you speak to the arguments and the reasoning that it was a 5-2 split vote?
I think that there were a couple of items that were discussed at that point. One of them was this idea of Wilderness Park, and when will we be looking at annexing that? Should we be doing that now? And in talking through that, I kind of laid out those reasons why we're not now. We don't want to get ourselves into a situation where we can't provide those services if they're requested. So that was one piece. I think the other was just kind of this question about the tree farm use itself, and bringing that into the city. If they wanted to continue that use, that could happen. That wouldn't be an issue. And so I think that there was some question about that as well.
And then there was also the idea that the Southwest Village area hasn't really developed yet. So it's in the city, but it's vacant land or not being urbanized necessarily. And what we'd say to that is that it's not necessarily developed yet. It is developing, though. We are getting new interest in it. And even these undeveloped areas in the city, they're still paying the city tax levy. So it goes back to the equity idea of this property would be paying the same taxes as their neighbors.
Okay. All right. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Please come forward.
Dale Schmidt Jr. I reside at 8401 South First Street. My wife and I own the property that they're talking about. I don't know if that's visible for you or not. In speaking against this is not an urban area. This is a strictly rural area. We have Wilderness Park running for several miles. We have just to the south of the property, and I'll show you some pictures in just a minute. This is the 3-mile city limits picture. This gives you a little better feeling that of where the property is in relation to the city limits. The property is actually located right in the middle here, so Wilderness Park and other surrounding areas are urban or are not urban. On the 2040 proposed land use, there is no change in Wilderness Park. We will continue to have to deal with animals, wildlife, and trying to deal with them, and raising trees and nursery stock is a challenge. We have had electric fence up trying to keep deer out. It's done a good job. We had some flooding, take down the fence that we had up, and we don't have the fence up at this time. The closest water hydrant, they say they have water hydrant. This the trees in the back are where the nursery is right now. We are between 200 and 300 yards away from that. It would take almost 400 yards of water hose if you were trying to service a fire. The lift station that was put in to service Southwest Village is considerably higher elevation than our property. We do not have sewer. We do not have access to sewer at this time. The properties north of us, Department of Roads. The property south of us is a brome field that will eventually be connected with the Lincoln Race Course. It's actually a part of the Lincoln Race Course. The track east side would actually cross First Street, and they would have to move it further out into that field at some point in time as the race course would develop. And the property to the west of us is nothing but agricultural in use. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in opposition to this. I don't think that all of the facts were presented at the Planning Commission, or it probably would have been voted down at that point in time. We actually have 3 different properties. Only 2 of them are, you know, the main property that we had originally purchased is surrounded by 2 other properties that are not inside the city limits, so we really are not surrounded by city limits properties. Thank you again. Any questions?
John?
It's proposed that there be 32 acres here. Now, do you own all 32 acres?
We only own about between 15 and 16. The rest of them are actually Department of Roads. This
right-of-way or?
Yeah, it's the highway. And at some point, when the South Beltway and the Expressway gets put together, the on-ramp to Highway 77 will be taking a portion of the north part of our property. This kind of shows you where the lift station is in relation to the property, and this is showing you where the fire hydrant is in relation to the...
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, sir. Would you care to have a rebuttal?
So one thing that we wanted to point out is that this area, although it was approved for development 10 or so years ago, you know, that might have been a timing thing with the recession. We do have active development going on in this area now, and one I'll just point out is this area here in this square was recently modified. An amended preliminary plat was approved for residential development, and so that's being graded, and I think that those dwelling units will probably start coming up next year. There are active discussions about the rest of this commercial area, and some serious thought in making amendments to that to bring that development on at this time as well. I think the other thing that I'd just like to note again is this idea of urban versus rural. The fact that this is contiguous to the city limits. I think that, you know, Wilderness Park is, you know, on the east there, on the other side of Highway 77, but this property is contiguous on these multiple sides to the city limits today. The other map, I think maybe Andrew can pull up and talk about, has to do with the utilities and the location of those.
So this is showing the sewer and water lines. As Mr. Schmidt indicated, sewer is right here, or water or hydrants are right here, and then sewer is right there as well. So yes, sewer and water is not literally touching this property, but as we'll see going forward on many of these annexations, the sewer and water lines aren't necessarily having to be at the property, but as I mentioned earlier, if the property owners want sewer and water, they can request that via assessment district. So if sewer and water is available in the sense that no additional trunk lines or anything would need to be built, it's just the local lines would need to be built. And just like everyone else in the city, they would need to be paid for by the property owner.
John?
I like your map there. So Mr. Schmidt said that the on-ramp or whatever part of the west or south beltway would be take part of his property. If we annex him now, that would increase the price of property, would it not? Because he'd be in the city?
It would increase his valuation because he is another Greenbelt property. So it would go up in that sense.
And then if the Department of Roads comes in or whomever to acquire his land, they would have to pay more money to him because his land's now worth more.
Potentially, yeah.
So our South Beltway would cost us more?
Let's have a definitive answer.
Steve Henderson, the Planning Department. Routinely get questions from assessors about value. The value, they don't look at if it's in the city limits or not. They rarely also don't look at the assessor's value. They're looking at, and these would be assessors paid for by the Department of Roads, or on the opposite side, people looking at their value. They're looking at what is it zoned, what is it shown in the comp plan, is it shown for development. They're not looking at what does the assessor show as this value, because that would be quite unfair to a property owner who is shown for commercial development, let's say, and is working on plans, but since they're just not yet in the city limits, their value is quite low. That would be unfair to that property owner. So the property owners typically in the Department of Roads, or if it's a city public works or real estate, they're looking at what is the market value of it. They're not looking at the assessed value necessarily.
Okay. Thank you. The testimony opportunity, this is rebuttal time, so testimony is closed on this item. Next item, please.
All right, next would be item 34, annexation 17010, annexing approximately 211 acres of property at North 56th and Fletcher Avenue.
David Gary with the Planning Department. I'll start out this one as this annexation proposed area is slightly different than the others that we've been talking about today. I want to be clear on kind of what we're working with now. And you'll hear this from the property owner who's in attendance as well. So what we have here is we have an area that is completely surrounded by the city. Wait till that comes up so you actually get to see it. So North 56th Street here. So the blue area is the property in question. The white is currently annexed areas of the city, so it is completely surrounded. This area is very much dominated by floodplain and floodway. And we knew that going into this, and so there's been discussion ongoing about what the use of this property is moving forward. This was an area that was under consideration in the 2008 annexation package, but then it was actually removed at that time. So it's been on the annexation radar for a number of years. And so what we have been working on with this, and at that time I should say, the idea of doing a conservation easement, and Paul and Andrew will get into some details on what that means in a moment, but the idea of doing a conservation easement over parts of this property would be appropriate. That has not taken place up to this point. We propose that be pursued by the property owner, and that is an understanding that we're in agreement with. And so what we would like to do on this item would be to propose a slight delay in actual action on this, but to hold the hearing today still, for some time for the property owner to work with city staff and perhaps other agencies to work out a conservation easement that would make sense for this property. So with that kind of preface, before we go into this one, now we'll have Paul and Andrew come up and talk about the actual proposed area for annexation.
So a few quick details about this one. It is 211 acres. As David indicated, it's used for open space. There's a picture of a rock crusher that's from 2016 that is gone now, so that's not there anymore. This does have an odd jurisdictional situation. Of course, all of the white area of the city is served by Lincoln Fire and Rescue. This west parcel is served by Raymond Rural Fire. The east parcel is served by Waverly Rural Fire. So this annexation would address that, and the whole area would be served by LFR.
Okay, questions? Carl?
Yes. So on the northern boundary of this property, that's Salt Creek, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And all of this virtually is in the floodplain?
There's actually some area outside of the floodplain, kind of where this area is, where the rock crusher was. Some of that area is out of the floodplain.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Jane?
And what is the current use of the property right now?
Open space. I think there may be some agriculture, some haying maybe going on.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Hi, Bob Caldwell with Nebco, 6100 Luann Lane, Lincoln. I'd like to appreciate the work that planning has done in working with us as the landowner for the property and several members of the council that we've talked to. We're at a little quandary to figure out what to do with this property. Almost the entire north half of the property is floodway where you can't develop at all. The south half of the property, except for the postage stamp area where the rock crusher was, is all floodplain. If you were to walk out to the property, it's almost all either wetland or farm ground, and so there is really limited development potential. As the landowner, we look to engage in a discussion related to a conservation easement for at least the area that is the floodway. We think there may be some mutual benefit for both the city potentially NRD, Nebraska Game and Parks, or whoever determines is the appropriate authority to maybe engage in those discussions, to look at the property. If that doesn't bear fruit, clearly the annexation can move forward, but we would like to investigate the conservation easement at that time. Currently it is just farm ground. And I'd entertain any questions.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please. Oh.
So I think that we're all on board with working with the property owner to get a conservation easement. We have talked to our watershed management division, and they are willing to work through this process as well. Just in terms of a date for delay, we were looking at the first Planning Commission meeting, which would be February 5th. So after that item were on that agenda at Planning Commission, we would then bring it forward to council with that agreement.
Are you saying you want us to delay this item until then, or just that item will come back then?
Yes, I think we want to delay that item until then, so we won't take action on this particular annexation. We'll spend some time to get that conservation easement put together and then bring it forward together.
And you don't have a date certain for that at this point?
I think in the discussions that we've had with the property owner, we're shooting for going to the February 5th Planning Commission date. So we would be after that at City Council.
Okay.
What if
we could just place it on pending, no date certain.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next then are items 35 and 36. They are text amendment 17016, amending Chapter 27.63 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to special permits by amending Section 27.63.470, subsection D, to authorize City Council to increase or decrease the minimum parking requirements in the H4 General Commercial District. And item 36 is special permit number 2004A, as in Apple, application of Alpha Brewing Operations LLC to amend special permit 2004 to reduce the required parking ratio for assembly facilities from 1 stall per 300 square feet to 1 stall per 1,000 square feet on property generally located at North 56th and Alvo Road.
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department. Here on these two particular items. Not sure if the applicant is here or not, but they can also certainly add information. Generally, this was, Alpha Brewing was looking to develop a very large facility at this location, but they were going to be required by the size of that building to provide more parking stalls than they really needed. In some of our other zoning districts, there are ways to reduce the parking standard. Came to discover really in the H4, when you're there by a planned service commercial, we didn't have that flexibility. And so we thought for both this application and for other future applications in the H4 that are planned service commercial, it'd be appropriate to give the City Council that ability to amend it. And in looking at their specific site plan, then the next item then does reduce it. They have land on site, so if they sell this building to somebody else, they would be able to meet the parking requirement at some point in the future. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Carl?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Hendrickson, could you talk about the business use of the property?
In general, as I understand it, they manufacture, a lot of the equipment is manufactured elsewhere. It is then brought to the site. They do a lot of the specifications. It's not necessarily a brewery itself. It sells brewing equipment to other persons.
Okay, so it would not be a brew pub.
Correct. They're not going to be
have
tapping things on site other than just testing their equipment.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item or these items? Next item, please.
That actually concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session. We'll start with our public hearing resolutions. Item 24 is the tort claims introduced by Camp.
So moved. Moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 25, the award of the contract to the lowest bidder for the agreement between between the city and State Department of Transportation for the 48th and Highway 2 traffic signal rebuild project, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. There's an
I'd like to
amendment.
move motion to amend number 1.
Second?
And it basically specifies that Watts Electric Company would be the contractor.
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Now on the main motion.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 26 is approving the First Amendment to the development agreement for the reconfiguration of South Point Pavilions between the city and Red Capital Management, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Our public hearing ordinance's second reading are items 27 through 36. On item 34, we do have the request to place it on pending, no date certain.
So moved. Second?
Moved by Cindy, seconded by Jane.
Wait, what?
Are you talking about the no date certain pit?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Carey knows what date that would come to council. I would feel more comfortable putting a date on this just to try and move things along, keep it in progress, and I mean, if people would be amenable to including the date.
I think they're looking 4 months ahead.
February
There could be
16th.
some blips or something. It just makes it simple for them to.
Nothing
put
like a
it in.
deadline to keep you working along, though.
Well,
It's no dates. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I think the idea was that we would be working with a goal of getting back to council on February 5th.
Planning.
That's
not-
planning.
Planning.
Sorry, excuse me.
Planning.
To be this, no, now we got to look at
It's
this
at least
again.
10 days before it comes to us.
That'd be,
Planning
Okay.
Commission, January 31st, and likely coming back to the city council on February 12th then. That's the goal type of deadline that we're looking for. In order to bring both,
But what you said is different than what was said in the hearing.
Yeah.
yeah, that could be a President's Day holiday.
The next week is President's Day.
yeah, it'll be the following week.
vote on it then.
Is it? So
Well, if there's some confusion about the
Let's-
date, then
let's-
let's
I think
not do it.
we can clarify this,
Let's
this is
do-
fine.
pending,
It's
no
fine.
date certain.
Yep,
All right.
that's fine.
Please call the roll.
This is place on pending, no date certain.
Correct.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then, ordinance's third reading. Item 37 is amending Chapter 2.76 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the personnel system, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Benny, seconded by Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 38 is approving a real estate sales agreement between the city and Kelly Custom Homes for the sale of city-owned property at 3268 Randolph Street, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Resolution for action only is item 39, approving a contract between the city and Treat America Food Services for the annual services for meal prep for aging partners, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Benny. Benny wins. All right, discussion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Resolutions on first reading are items 40 and 41. Ordinances first reading are items 42 through 45. Our pending list date certain are items 46 and 47. Item 46 will come off. Our pending list are items 48 through 50.
Mr. Chair, I'd move for adjournment.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Ridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Raybold? Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
And carried, 7-0.